In the heart of a realm cloaked in mystery, where mist wove through the valleys like a silent serpent, the Forge of Titans lay concealed. For centuries, this legendary anvil, buried deep within the Iron Spike Mountains, had been nothing more than a tale told by firesides. It was said that the forge held the power to create weapons of unparalleled might, weapons that could bend the fate of nations. In the scattered villages nestled among these rugged peaks, whispers of the forge's power mingled with the evening fog. Elders spoke of it with a mix of reverence and fear, while the young listened with wide-eyed wonder. The very thought of such power birthed both hope and trepidation in the hearts of the people. It was during this time of uneasy peace that warlord Draven, a figure feared across the land for his merciless conquests and unyielding ambition, learned of the forge's true location. Draven, a man whose name was synonymous with war and bloodshed, saw in the forge a means to achieve his ultimate goal: unchallenged dominion over all lands. He envisioned an unstoppable army, armed with weapons forged from the mythical anvil, bending the world to his will. In the bustling market of Ephesus, a town shadowed by the very mountains that housed the forge, Tauren, a young blacksmith's apprentice, overheard a hushed conversation. Two of Draven's scouts, cloaked in the anonymity of the crowd, spoke of their master's plan to seize the forge. Tauren's hand tightened around his hammer. The weight of the revelation was almost too much to bear. He knew the stories of the forge well. Every child in Ephesus did. The idea of such a power in Draven's cruel grasp was unthinkable. Tauren, a lad of no more than 17 winters, with hands already calloused from the forge and eyes as sharp as the swords he helped create, felt a heavy burden settle upon his shoulders. He was but an apprentice, yet the urgency of the moment called for action. The forge, if awoken, could unleash an era of darkness upon the land, an era where skies would be clouded not by mist, but by the smoke of endless war. That night, under the cover of darkness, Tauren made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He resolved to embark on a perilous journey, one filled with unknown dangers and slim chances of success. His mission was clear yet daunting: to find the Forge of Titans and destroy it before Draven could bend its ancient power to his nefarious will. With nothing but a satchel of provisions, the tools of his trade, and a heart laden with determination, Tauren set out under the starlit sky. His path would lead him into the heart of legends, through trials that would test the very metal of his soul. As he ventured forth from Ephesus, the sleeping town unaware of the apprentice's quiet departure, the first light of dawn crept over the mountains. It cast long shadows on the path ahead, a path that would lead Tauren into the annals of legend, as the unlikely hero who stood against the might of the Forge of Titans. Tauren's journey led him to the edge of the Whispering Woods, a vast expanse of ancient trees where sunlight rarely touched the ground. The forest, notorious for its labyrinthine paths and perilous inhabitants, stood as the first formidable barrier in his quest. Legends spoke of the woods as a living entity, whispering secrets of those who dared to traverse its depths. As he stepped into the shadow of the towering trees, a chill ran down his spine. Branches intertwined above, forming a canopy that danced with the wind's eerie melody. Every step Tauren took was cautious, his senses heightened to the subtle movements around him. It was in these dense, dark woods that Tauren's path crossed with Valerie's. She was a warrior of the woodlands, her presence as sudden and silent as a shadow. Clad in leather armor that blended with the forest, Valerie moved with a grace that belied her lethal skills with both bow and blade. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, seemed to pierce through Tauren's resolve. Valerie, too, had heard of Draven's plan and the peril it posed. Her home, nestled within the heart of the Whispering Woods, was under threat from the warlord's ambition. She knew the forest better than anyone and understood the gravity of the task at hand. After a tense exchange, where every word weighed heavy with the burden of their mission, she agreed to guide Tauren through the treacherous woods. Their journey together was full of challenges. The forest was a maze of deceit, with paths that twisted and turned, leading travelers astray. They moved with deliberate care, avoiding the numerous traps set by both man and nature. Hidden pits, camouflage snares, and perilous cliffs were just some of the dangers that lay hidden beneath the deceptive tranquility of the forest. Beasts, both mundane and mystical, lurked in the shadows of the whispering woods. Creatures with glowing eyes and stealthy steps prowled the underbrush, watching the intruders with hungry interest. Tauren and Valerie had to rely on each other's strengths to navigate these threats. Valerie's expertise with the bow felled threats from a distance, while Tauren's strength and skill with the blade were crucial in close encounters. Despite their common goal, trust did not come easily between the two. Tauren, with his straightforward honesty and untested idealism, contrasted sharply with Valerie's pragmatic and guarded nature. Their conversations were brief and to the point, focused solely on the task at hand. Yet as they journeyed deeper into the heart of the Whispering Woods, a mutual respect began to form. They were both warriors in their own right, bound by a shared determination to prevent Draven from seizing the forge. As Tauren and Valerie emerged from the suffocating embrace of the Whispering Woods, they were greeted by a landscape that contrasted starkly with the dark, dense forest they had left behind. Before them lay the rolling plains, a vast expanse of undulating grasslands where the wind played melodies in the tall grasses. It was in this seemingly tranquil expanse that they stumbled upon a secret long hidden from the world: the Hammerhand clan. The Hammerhand clan, an ancient order of smiths, was more than a mere legend. They were the keepers of forgotten knowledge, masters of metal and magic. Their existence was a closely guarded secret, known only to a few outside their secluded community. Tucked away in a hidden valley surrounded by natural fortifications, the Hammerhand clan had thrived in isolation, perfecting their craft far from prying eyes. The first sight of their settlement was a striking one. Forge chimneys protruded from the earth like fingers of stone, with plumes of smoke painting the sky in shades of grey. The rhythmic sound of hammer striking anvil echoed through the valley. The buildings were a blend of stone and wood, constructed with the same meticulous care they applied to their craft. Tauren and Valerie were met with caution as they approached. The Hammerhands were not used to strangers, especially those emerging from the Whispering Woods. It was only after Tauren explained their purpose that the guards reluctantly allowed them to enter. The heart of the village was the Great Forge, a marvel of ancient architecture and engineering. Here, the elder smiths worked, their hammers ringing out in a symphony of creation. The walls were lined with weapons and armor of exquisite craftsmanship, each piece imbued with enchantments that whispered of old magic. Tauren presented his plea to the elders of the clan. He spoke of Draven's discovery of the Forge of Titans and his intention to forge weapons of war and conquest. He explained their quest to find and destroy the forge before it could be used to unleash untold destruction. The elders listened intently, their faces etched with concern. They knew well the power of the Forge of Titans. It was a chapter of history they had hoped would remain closed. The decision to aid Tauren and Valerie was not a light one. It meant breaking centuries of seclusion and intervening in the affairs of the outside world. After a lengthy deliberation, the elders agreed to assist in their quest. They saw in Tauren a spark of something rare, a selfless courage that resonated with the values of the Hammerhand clan. The clan offered to equip them with weapons and armor forged with the ancient techniques and enchantments known only to them. This gear would give them a fighting chance against the dangers that lay ahead. As the smiths began their work, Tauren and Valerie were invited to witness the forging process. It was a spectacle of fire and skill, where raw metal was transformed into works of art. The hammer hands worked with a precision and dedication that was almost ritualistic, their hammers an extension of their will. Equipped with new gear and bolstered by the support of the Hammerhand clan, Toren and Valerie prepared to continue their journey. They had found unexpected allies in this secluded valley, allies who shared their commitment to thwarting Draven's dark ambitions. Leaving the sanctuary of the Hammerhand clan behind, Toren and Valerie set their sights on the formidable Iron Spike Mountains, the alleged resting place of the Forge of Titans. These mountains, known for their jagged peaks and treacherous terrain, were a natural fortress, deterring all but the most determined or foolhardy. As they approached the base of the mountains, the landscape transformed dramatically. The rolling plains gave way to rugged foothills, littered with boulders and sparse vegetation. The mountains themselves loomed overhead, their peaks piercing the clouds like ancient sentinels. The path ahead was a winding ascent, filled with dangers both seen and unseen. The journey up the Iron Spike Mountains was arduous. The paths were narrow and winding, skirting perilous drops that plummeted into abyssal depths. Loose rocks and slippery shale made footing treacherous, demanding constant vigilance. Toren and Valerie had to rely on their endurance and agility to navigate these hazards. The higher they climbed, the more inhospitable the environment became. The air grew thinner and colder, biting through their cloaks and chilling their bones. They traversed narrow ledges that skirted sheer cliffs, crossed rickety bridges over gaping chasms, and clambered over steep, rocky inclines. Each step was a test of their strength. But the physical challenges of the mountain were not the only threats they faced. Draven's scouts, dark figures mounted on horseback, followed them from a distance. These scouts were skilled trackers, able to move silently and swiftly through the rugged terrain. Their presence was a constant reminder of the danger that stalked them, a shadow of the impending confrontation with Draven's forces. Toren and Valerie were acutely aware of the eyes that watched them. They moved with extra caution, often taking longer routes to evade their pursuers. Despite their efforts to remain unseen, the occasional glimpse of a distant figure or the sound of a horse's whinny confirmed that their movements were being monitored. The presence of the scouts also meant that time was of the essence. Draven would soon learn of their progress and might hasten his plans for the forge. The urgency of their mission weighed heavily on them, adding to the physical and mental strain of the climb. As they ascended further, the mountain revealed its secrets. Hidden valleys and secluded caves dotted the landscape, remnants of ancient volcanic activity. Steam vents and hot springs hinted at the geothermal forces that simmered beneath the surface, a stark reminder of the mountain's dormant power. It was during one of their brief rests in a secluded alcove that Toren and Valerie stumbled upon an old carving on a rock face, obscured by moss and time. The carving depicted a forge surrounded by figures that appeared to be both worshipping and fearing it. This ancient relic of a bygone era further confirmed their belief that they were on the right path. The final leg of their ascent took them through a narrow pass, where the wind howled like a banshee, threatening to sweep them off their feet. It was here, at the edge of the world, that they finally beheld their destination, a plateau nestled between the highest peaks of the Iron Spike Mountains. It was a desolate place, a land of rock and ice, where the sky and earth met. Upon reaching the plateau of the Iron Spike Mountains, Toren and Valerie were met with a sight that was terrifying. Before them stood the legendary Forge of Titans, its ancient structure carved into the very mountain itself. The air around the forge shimmered with heat, and the ground beneath their feet was warm to the touch. It was as if the mountain itself was alive with a fiery pulse. But it wasn't the forge that demanded their immediate attention. Guarding the entrance were the Fire Guardians, creatures of legend made manifest. These colossal beings, forged from flame and molten rock, stood as sentinels to the forge. Their bodies glowed with the intensity of a furnace, casting a hellish light that flickered across the stark landscape. The Guardians, sensing the presence of intruders, stirred to life with a roar that echoed like thunder across the plateau. They moved with a grace that belied their massive size, their forms fluid like molten lava. From their eyes blazed an infernal light, and their mouths were agape with flames that licked the air hungrily. Tauren and Valerie, realizing the magnitude of the threat before them, readied themselves for battle. They knew that reaching the forge meant facing these formidable foes. Clad in the enchanted armor and wielding the weapons provided by the Hammerhand clan, they braced for the fight of their lives. The battle that ensued was a spectacle of fire and fury. Tauren, gripping his enchanted hammer, charged at the nearest Guardian. Each swing of his hammer sent sparks flying, the impact ringing out like a bell. The Guardian's fiery hide was nearly impervious, but Tauren's weapon, imbued with the magic of the Hammerhands, was able to inflict damage. Valerie, with her unparalleled agility and mastery of the bow, unleashed a barrage of enchanted arrows. Each arrow burst into a brilliant light upon impact, momentarily driving back the fiery creatures. She moved with fluid precision, dodging the Guardians' fiery attacks, her every step a dance of death. The Guardians, for all their might, were not invincible. They had weaknesses, chinks in their armor of flame and stone. Tauren and Valerie worked in unison, one drawing the attention of a Guardian, while the other attacked its vulnerabilities. The plateau became a battlefield of light and shadow, filled with the roar of flames and the clang of metal. The Guardians, fueled by the infernal energy of the forge, were relentless. But Tauren and Valerie fought with a determination born of necessity. They knew that failure was not an option, that the fate of their world hung in the balance. As the battle raged, they slowly began to turn the tide. With each strike, each carefully aimed shot, the Guardians' fiery forms flickered and dimmed. Cracks appeared in their molten armor, revealing the energy that sustained them. In a final, desperate effort, Tauren and Valerie concentrated their attacks on the largest of the Guardians. With a mighty swing of his hammer, Tauren struck a decisive blow, shattering the Guardian's fiery shell. The creature let out a final, ear-splitting roar before collapsing into a heap of smouldering rock. With the fall of the largest Guardian, the others, now weakened, became disoriented. Seizing the opportunity, Valerie and Tauren pressed their attack, driving the remaining Guardians back, exploiting every crack and opening with precise and deadly strikes. Finally, as the last of the Guardians crumbled to ash and ember, an eerie silence fell over the plateau. The battle against the Fire Guardians left Tauren and Valerie weary. They stepped into the forge, crossing the threshold into a realm that felt removed from time itself. The air inside was stifling, a miasma of heat that wrapped around them like a thick cloak. The walls glowed a dull red, illuminated by rivers of molten metal that ran through channels carved into the stone. The forge was a cavernous space, its ceiling lost in shadow. The heat emanated from the forge's heart, a colossal anvil set in the center of the chamber. This anvil was the source of the forge's legendary power, a relic from an age when gods and mortals walked the earth together. It pulsed with a deep, ominous energy, its surface glowing like the heart of a star. The air was filled with the smell of sulfur and burning metal, a scent that spoke of ancient magic and untold secrets. All around the anvil, the remnants of unfinished weapons and armor lay scattered. These pieces hummed with residual energy, a faint echo of their intended might. Tauren approached the anvil. The Hammerhand clan had spoken of its power, but to see it in person was to truly understand the magnitude of what they faced. He gripped his hammer tightly, the tool of his trade now a weapon against a force that defied comprehension. Valerie stood guard, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. The silence in the forge was oppressive, a quiet so complete it seemed to absorb sound. Torin raised his hammer, the metal glowing faintly with the enchantments laid upon it by the Hammerhand clan. He knew that destroying the anvil was key to rendering the forge powerless. It was not just a physical act, it was a symbolic one, breaking the chain of violence and tyranny that Draven sought to continue. Just as Torin raised his hammer for the final decisive strike on the anvil, the cavernous chamber was flooded with the thunderous sound of clanking armor and malevolent shouts. Warlord Draven, flanked by a legion of his best soldiers, stormed into the forge. Draven, a towering figure clad in dark, imposing armor, entered with a presence that seemed to consume the light around him. In his hand, he wielded a massive sword, its blade as dark as obsidian, reflecting no light. His eyes, cold and ruthless, were fixed on Torin, burning with a mix of fury and begrudging respect. The air in the forge tensed as the two forces collided. Steel clashed against steel in a maelstrom of violence and fury. Draven's soldiers, battle-hardened and merciless, advanced with a disciplined brutality. They were not just men. They were instruments of Draven's will, extensions of his desire for power. Valerie, with her bow at the ready, positioned herself strategically. She became a whirlwind of lethal precision, her arrows finding their marks with deadly efficiency. Each shot was a line of defense, holding back the tide of soldiers that threatened to overwhelm them. Her movements were a dance of survival, each step, each draw of the bowstring a calculated decision in the chaos of battle. Meanwhile, Torin faced Draven head-on. The clash between the apprentice blacksmith and the warlord was a sight to behold. Torin, fueled by determination and the skills honed on his journey, met Draven's brutal assaults with a surprising resilience. The hammer that had shattered the anvil was now a weapon of defiance, parrying and striking against Draven's dark sword. The duel was intense, each blow ringing through the forge, sparks flying as metal met metal. Draven fought with a savagery that matched his ambition, his strikes powerful and relentless. Yet Torin stood his ground, countering with the agility and ingenuity of a skilled blacksmith. As the battle raged, the forge itself seemed to respond to the conflict. The walls vibrated with the remnants of the anvil's shattered power, groans of the mountain echoing the clash of the combatants. The floor was littered with debris, making the fight even more treacherous as both sides maneuvered for advantage. In the heart of the forge, the battle raged with a ferocity that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Iron Spike Mountains. Torin and Valerie, though fighting valiantly, were vastly outnumbered. Draven's soldiers, relentless and ruthless, pressed on with a chilling determination. The clashing of steel and the cries of combat filled the air, creating a symphony of chaos and desperation. Draven himself, a behemoth in the fray, fought with a brutality that seemed to embody the darkness of his ambition. Just as the situation appeared dire, a new sound echoed through the forge, the thunderous roar of approaching warriors. The Hammerhand clan, having decided to break their centuries of isolation for the greater good, descended upon the forge. They emerged from the shadows like spectres of a forgotten age, their armor gleaming with ancient runes and their weapons humming with enchantments. The Hammerhands, led by the elder Smith Balfour, charged into the battle with the fury of warriors whose skills had been honed over lifetimes. They were not just blacksmiths, they were guardians of a sacred tradition, fighters who had mastered the art of war as deeply as they had the craft of the forge. With every strike of their hammers and every sweep of their blades, they turned the tide of the battle. The arrival of the Hammerhand clan was a shock to Draven's forces. The discipline and ferocity of these legendary smiths were unlike anything they had faced. The Hammerhands moved through Draven's soldiers with a devastating efficiency, breaking their lines and sowing confusion in their ranks. Amidst this chaos, Torin saw his opportunity. With Draven momentarily distracted by the new arrivals, Torin dashed towards the shattered anvil. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and adrenaline, his every step a race against time. Draven, realizing Torin's intent, roared in anger and broke away from the melee, his dark sword raised in a deadly arc aimed at Torin. Valerie, seeing Torin's peril, acted with swift precision. She loosed a volley of arrows, each one aimed to hinder Draven's pursuit. Her efforts bought Torin precious seconds as she skillfully dodged and weaved through the enemy ranks to provide cover. Torin reached the anvil, its shattered remnants still pulsing with a residual power. He knew what he had to do. The destruction of the anvil was crucial to ensure that its power could never be wielded for evil again. He raised his hammer, the same tool that had forged weapons and now sought to end the cycle of violence they could bring. As he prepared to strike, Draven, thwarted but not defeated, closed in with a murderous rage. The warlord was a terrifying sight, his armor splattered with the remnants of the battle, his sword an extension of his wrath. In the heart of the tumultuous forge, amidst a battle that raged like a tempest, Torin stood with his hammer raised, his eyes fixed on the remnants of the ancient anvil. With the weight of destiny upon his shoulders, he brought the hammer down with all the force he could muster. The impact was monumental, a collision of wills between the apprentice blacksmith and the legacy of a bygone era. As the hammer struck the fractured anvil, a shockwave of immense power erupted from the point of impact. The force of the blow reverberated through the forge, shaking its very foundations. It was as if Torin had struck at the heart of the mountain itself. The anvil, already weakened from their earlier efforts, cracked further under the assault, fissures spreading across its ancient surface like lightning. The air in the forge vibrated with the release of pent-up energies, a maelstrom of power that had been contained for centuries. The walls of the forge groaned and trembled, stones and debris beginning to fall as the structure succumbed to the forces unleashed. The glow of the forge dimmed, its once roaring fires flickering and dying as the anvil's power waned. In this moment of triumph and chaos, Draven, consumed by a rage that burned hotter than the forge's fires, saw his plans crumbling before his eyes. With a roar of fury, he lunged at Torin, his dark sword raised for a killing blow. The warlord's face was twisted in a snarl, the embodiment of his thwarted ambition and unbridled wrath. But Valerie, ever vigilant, sprang into action. With the agility of a forest predator, she intercepted Draven, her blades flashing in the dimming light of the forge. She met Draven's rage with a ferocious intensity of her own. Their battle was a whirlwind of steel and shadow, a dance of death between the guardian of the woods and the tyrannical warlord. Valerie parried Draven's powerful strikes with grace and precision, countering with swift, targeted blows. Her movements were a blur, a symphony of lethal intent, as she fought to protect Torin and the mission they had undertaken. Meanwhile, Torin, reeling from the force of his own strike, struggled to regain his footing amidst the collapsing forge. He watched as Valerie battled Draven, her form a stark contrast to the hulking brute force of the warlord. He knew he had to act quickly. The forge was coming apart, and they needed to escape before they were buried under its ruins. As the battle raged, the Hammerhand clan fought to hold back the remnants of Draven's forces, their hammers and swords a bulwark against the tide of enemies. The clash of metal, the shouts of warriors, and the crumbling of the forge was a fitting symphony for the end of the Forge of Titans. The destruction of the anvil had set in motion a catastrophic chain of events. The ancient Forge of Titans, a structure bound to the heart of the Iron Spike Mountains, began its final, thunderous death throes. The mountain, disturbed after centuries of dormancy, reacted violently to the release of the forge's energies. Within the forge, chaos reigned. The ground shook with seismic fury, sending shockwaves rippling through the cavernous chamber. Huge chunks of the ceiling began to give way, crashing down in a deadly rain of rock and debris. Torin and Valerie, realizing the imminent danger, knew they had to escape immediately. They shared a brief, determined glance before springing into action. Torin clutching his hammer, and Valerie, with her bow slung across her back and blades in hand, followed the Hammerhand clan as they carved a path towards the forge's entrance. The Hammerhands, with their centuries of experience, led the way. They moved with a purpose, their knowledge of the forge's layout guiding them through the collapsing chamber. Debris fell all around them, creating a perilous obstacle course that tested their agility. As they navigated this maelstrom of destruction, a tragic realization dawned on them. Draven, the warlord whose ambition had brought them to this dire point, was nowhere to be seen. Consumed by his obsession with power, Draven had refused to flee the collapsing forge. His final stand would be his undoing. The mountain's wrath, indiscriminate in its fury, would claim him as its victim. The sound of Draven's final, enraged shouts echoed faintly over the din of destruction, a haunting reminder of the cost of unchecked ambition. It was a sobering thought for Torin and Valerie. As the group neared the exit, the intensity of the collapse increased. Massive boulders tumbled down, blocking their path, forcing them to find quick alternatives. Every second was precious as the mountain threatened to entomb them within its rocky grave. Valerie, agile and quick, scouted ahead, identifying the safest routes through the collapsing tunnels. Torin, with his strength and hammer, helped clear smaller debris that obstructed their path. The Hammerhands, with their combined might and unwavering spirit, protected the rear, ensuring no one was left behind. Finally, with a burst of effort, they emerged from the forge, escaping into the cold, crisp air of the mountain's exterior. They stumbled out just as the entrance collapsed behind them, sealing the forge of Titans in a tomb of stone and rubble. The group stood for a moment, panting and disheveled, on a precipice overlooking the valley below. Behind them, the mountain continued to crumble, an avalanche of rock cascading down its slopes. The sound was deafening, a final resounding end to the legacy of the Forge of Titans. As they watched the destruction, a mix of relief and exhaustion washed over them. They had survived, but the journey had taken its toll. They had witnessed the end of an era, the fall of a warlord, and the destruction of a power that had been both a legend and a curse. Standing at the foot of the now quiet Ironspike Mountains, Torin, Valerie, and the Hammerhand clan watched as the first light of dawn pierced the sky. The rising sun cast a golden hue over the land, illuminating a world that had been forever changed by the events of the night. The destruction of the Forge of Titans and the fall of Warlord Draven marked the end of a dark chapter, but the cost of victory was etched deeply in the faces of those who had survived. The mountain, once a symbol of ancient mystery and power, now bore the scars of its violent upheaval. It stood fractured and diminished, a solemn reminder of the battle that had raged within its depths. The landscape around it was littered with debris. The air, though clear of the smoke and dust of battle, was heavy with the weight of loss. Many lives had been lost in the struggle against Draven and the Forge. Brave warriors of the Hammerhand clan, valiant in their last stand, lay among the fallen. The loss was a somber cost, paid for the freedom they had all fought for. The clan, though victorious, mourned their kin, their songs of grief echoing through the valley. Torin, standing amidst the remnants of the battle, felt a profound change within himself. He was no longer the apprentice blacksmith who had set out from Ephesus with a heart full of determination. The experiences of his journey had forged him anew, tempering his spirit and skill in the fires of adversity. He had faced a warlord, battled mythical guardians, and witnessed the destruction of a power that had shaped the course of history. These trials had imbued him with a sense of purpose that transcended the confines of a forge. Valerie, who had stood by Torin's side through their perilous journey, shared a quiet moment with him as they watched the sunrise. They had started as allies brought together by circumstance, but the trials they had faced together had forged a bond stronger than any steel. Valerie, the fierce warrior of the woodlands, had found a kinship with the young blacksmith, a connection born from shared struggles and triumphs. The Hammerhand clan, in the aftermath of the battle, began the solemn task of honoring their fallen. They gathered the bodies of their kin, preparing them for the journey to the afterlife according to their ancient customs. The clan, despite their loss, stood strong. They had played a crucial role in the events that transpired, and their bravery would be sung in the halls of their ancestors for generations to come. In the days following the monumental events at the Iron Spike Mountains, Tauren and Valerie, alongside the valiant Hammerhand clan, set about the task of healing a land scarred by conflict and tyranny. The destruction of the Forge of Titans and the fall of Warlord Draven had left a void, but also an opportunity for rebuilding and renewal. The Hammerhand clan, having played a pivotal role in the events that transpired, decided it was time to emerge from their long isolation. Their expertise in craftsmanship was not just limited to weapons and armor. They possessed skills that could aid in the reconstruction of shattered communities. Tauren and Valerie, driven by a newfound sense of duty, joined them in this endeavor. Together they traveled from village to village, their journey taking them across diverse landscapes, from rolling hills and verdant plains to the remnants of war-torn settlements. The scars of Draven's rule were evident everywhere. Burnt fields, ruined homes, and communities living in the shadow of fear. But amidst this devastation, there was also a spark of hope, a desire to rebuild and move forward. Tauren, with his background as a blacksmith, found himself at the forefront of the reconstruction efforts. He worked tirelessly at the forge, shaping metal for tools and rebuilding what had been destroyed. His hands, once used to the precision of crafting swords and shields, now brought forth plows and nails, the instruments of rebuilding and growth. Valerie, whose skills as a warrior had been indispensable in battle, found a new purpose in helping the villages strengthen their defenses and training the local militia. She taught them not just the skills of combat, but the importance of vigilance and unity. Her time in the Whispering Woods had given her an understanding of survival and protection, knowledge that was now passed on to those who needed it most. As they worked side by side, the bond between Tauren and Valerie deepened. They had started as allies brought together by fate, but through their shared experiences, a strong friendship had blossomed. They had seen each other at their best and worst, had fought together, and had saved each other's lives. This connection, forged in the heat of battle and solidified through their joint efforts to heal the land, was unbreakable. The Hammerhand clan, witnessing the transformation in the communities they helped, felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had been guardians of ancient traditions, but now they became guardians of the future. Their skills, once used to create weapons of war, were now a source of healing and growth. As the weeks turned to months, Tauren and Valerie saw the tangible impact of their efforts. Villages that had once been ruins began to thrive again. Fields were sown, homes were rebuilt, and laughter returned to the streets. The legacy of Draven's tyranny was slowly being erased, replaced by a sense of community and hope. Eventually, the time came for Tauren and Valerie to part ways with the Hammerhand clan. The clan, having set the foundation for recovery, decided to return to their secluded valley, now with a renewed commitment to engage with the world outside. Tauren and Valerie, with heavy hearts, bid farewell to their steadfast companions, knowing that their paths would cross again. As Tauren and Valerie continued their journey, aiding the lands ravaged by Draven's tyranny, an unexpected and formidable challenge emerged from the shadows of history. Deep within the remnants of the Iron Spike Mountains, where the Forge of Titans once stood, an ageless being stirred from his long seclusion. This being was none other than the original creator of the Forge of Titans, a figure shrouded in myth and legend, whose existence had been long forgotten by the world. This creator, known as Eoland, was a being of immense power and knowledge, a master smith whose skills had transcended the bounds of time and mortality. Eoland had watched in secret as the events unfolded, his heart filled with both rage and sorrow at the destruction of his life's work. The forge had been his magnum opus, a creation meant to bring order and strength to the world, but it had been twisted into a tool of war and conquest. Eoland emerged from his hidden sanctum, his appearance that of an ancient yet ageless man. His eyes held the wisdom of the ages, and his hands bore the calluses of a smith who had worked the anvil for centuries. Clad in robes that shimmered with an ethereal light, he made his way to the ruins of the forge, his every step resonating with a sense of purpose. Standing amidst the rubble of what was once his greatest achievement, Eoland vowed to rebuild the Forge of Titans. He believed that the world had strayed from the path he had envisioned, a path where order and strength reigned. In his eyes, the forge was the key to restoring this vision, a vision that he saw as the only way to save the world from chaos and weakness. Eoland's intentions, though born from a desire to bring order, posed a new and formidable challenge. The power of the Forge of Titans, once unleashed, could again become a beacon for those seeking dominion over others. The potential for it to be misused was a risk that the world could not afford, especially in a time when it was just beginning to heal from the scars of war. Torin and Valerie, upon learning of Eoland's emergence and his intentions, knew that they faced a dilemma unlike any before. Eoland was not a tyrant like Draven. He was a being of ancient power and wisdom, whose motives were not driven by mere ambition, but by a deep-seated belief in his vision for the world. Torin and Valerie prepared to confront Eoland. The outcome of this encounter would shape the future, determining whether the world would follow Eoland's vision of order or forge a new path towards a destiny of its own making.